No.
Senator Nyamu, just sit. I will cue you. I will give you an opportunity.
Madam Speaker, I thank you for giving me opportunity to contribute to this bill. And Madam Speaker, there are some misconceptions that have been shared in this House about the role of CRA, which I wanted to debunk, given that I sit in the Committee of Public. Madam Speaker, may you protect me from Cherargei and those who are making noise? Madam Speaker, Equalization Fund came about because in 1965, there was section paper number 10. And this paper number 10, Madam Speaker, was an executive order that made sure that some areas that in the wisdom or lack of wisdom of the then executive, they made sure that there are some regions which in our current order ended up being 14 counties that are in our territories today, Madam Speaker, that in their lack of wisdom or wisdom therefore, they thought that were not good enough for investment, Madam Speaker. And therefore, the framers of this constitution thought of how do we deal with the issues of marginalization historically and also be able to apprehend any kind of marginalization in the future. And this is the point that I wanted to make very strongly for people like Senator Mogeni and distinguished senators like Senator Boni Alwale, because if you read the Constitution, Madam Speaker, Article 216 of the Constitution, Madam Speaker, sub-Article 4, it says that the Commission, that is the Commission on Revenue Allocation, shall determine, publish, and regularly review a policy in which it sets out the criteria by which to identify the marginalized areas for the purposes of Article 2042, which establishes the Equalization Fund, Madam Speaker. What does this article mean, Madam Speaker? It means that marginalization was not only a problem in the past, but it's a going concern that possibly could also keep on happening within our borders in different forms. And Madam Speaker, even as we speak right now, Madam Speaker, we have observed a number of marginalization happening in our country, Madam Speaker. For instance, recently when there was recruitment of teachers, we have seen some regions getting more teachers than other regions. That's a form of marginalization, Madam Speaker, that the framers of the Constitution saw it best to be able to see the recruitment of KDF, Madam Speaker, and I can assure you that in Nyamira, the number of people who were taken to go to KDF was probably smaller than the number that were taken in other places, Madam Speaker. So marginalization will continue to happen in this country, and therefore it is best if this House, Madam Speaker, can protect a commission such as the Commission on Revenue Allocation, so that the Commission can do its job in terms of identifying these pockets of marginalization that continue to happen within our borders, Madam Speaker. And that's why I'm saying, Madam Speaker, that I'm even proud that somewhere like Migori, Madam Speaker, I can see that in this schedule, somewhere like Kuria West, a ward called Nyamosense Komosoko, which is the biggest ward, Madam Speaker, in that particular sub-county. Madam Speaker, if you go to Komosoko, they don't even have water. I know that in section paper number 10, Migori as a county was never marginalized. But if you look at the people of Kuria community, in Migori where I come from, Madam Speaker, they have constantly been marginalized by subsequent administrations, that these basic things like water and electricity has become a problem to them. If you look at, again, Madam Speaker, at Gorkachola Ward, which we have given 13 million here, Kaler in Yatike, Madam Speaker, which we have given 14 million, in Migori County, Makalda Kanyarwanda, we have given about 20 million, Muuru Bay, Madam Speaker, as well as North Kadem, which we have given about 34 million, Madam Speaker. If you look at these areas, Madam Speaker, you will find that they constantly face things that you can't even imagine that in the 21st century, Madam Speaker, people will face. You know about the Kabuto floods. We know about the lack of electricity in these areas. Miuru Bay has never even seen, despite being a place where you've got serious fish coming and feeding the nation, Madam Speaker, Miuru Bay has never seen any tarmac roads, Madam Speaker. Therefore, this demonstrates that, Madam Speaker, that marginalization and pockets of marginalization, Madam Speaker, continue to be in our borders, and therefore, as senators, as distinguished members of the House, we must continue supporting the independence of institutions such as CRA to continually make sure that they can be able to arrest this pocket of marginalization. If it were not for that, Madam Speaker, Sula West in Migori County, in the wards of Wasimbete, Wiga, that are getting a total of about 50 million, Madam Speaker, could not have gotten this money to deal with the issue of lack of water in those wards, Madam Speaker. And even if you go to Uriri constituency, in where I come from, Madam Speaker, in North Kanyamkago ward, they have got eminent problem, Madam Speaker, of water. Drinking water is a problem in these areas, Madam Speaker, to an extent that somebody will come all the way from Mayego and all the way from Nyabasari to go almost 3 kilometers to Oyani River to go and fetch water. And that water, Madam Speaker, is not treated. That's where all their animals are. And that's all where women are washing clothes. And yet they're supposed to use the same water to drink, Madam Speaker. I don't see a problem when CRA has identified North Kanyamkago to give North Kanyamkago 13 million just to solve the issue of water, Madam Speaker. And therefore, Madam Speaker, the interest of this House must also be able to empower CRA so that CRA starts looking at other forms of marginalization, not only those that are informed by
Senator Tobiko.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I thank you for this opportunity to contribute to this debate. Madam Speaker, it's not the first time we are interacting with this bill, and we are happy that finally it's going to, we are going to get to see these funds disbursed to our counties and see the difference that it will make for Kenyans, Madam Speaker, in the marginalized areas. Madam Speaker, I do support the distribution of the equalization fund to the areas that have been identified, Madam Speaker, particularly areas in Kajiado County, in Kajiado Central. The Lekutu ward is going to benefit, Madam Speaker. Matapato North is going to benefit, Matapato South and Purko, a total of 151 million for Kajiado Central. And Madam Speaker, in Kajiado South and Tonet Lenkisim ward is going to receive, Birikani Selengei ward is going to receive, Madam Speaker, Kuku and Rombo, Madam Speaker, a total of 66 million, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, for Kajiado West, which is going to receive the lion's share, Ewasongidongi ward, which is very marginalized, is going to receive, Madam Speaker, Kekonyokie Magadi, which is also very marginalized, Mosiro, which is also extremely marginalized, Madam Speaker, and Lodokilani ward is going to receive around 53 million, making a total of 218 for Kajiado West, Madam Speaker. I do support. But, Madam Speaker, whereas I support the areas in the entire country that are going to receive and that it's going to benefit those marginalized areas, I have a problem with the formula, Madam Speaker. The CRA formula, Madam Speaker, did not take into consideration other aspects of marginalization. Even in our urban centers, Madam Speaker, a place like Kitengela, which is just close by in Nairobi, should be looking like part and parcel of Nairobi. We have a place called Changombe that children have no space for school, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, that town has no sewer system. Kitengela town has water issues, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there are areas in our urban centers, like in Kajiado North, in Rongai, Kiserian, Ngong, we have a place called Geshagi. We have Gataka, areas that are marginalized and that are in need of services, Madam Speaker, but were not considered because they were looked at as areas that are in towns and were not considered, Madam Speaker, for this fund. It does not mean those who are in towns, Madam Speaker, are comfortable. There are places, areas in towns that are very, very needy, Madam Speaker. And in fact, if you find those who are needy in our urban centers, Madam Speaker, then you will know what poverty really means, Madam Speaker. And so that is why I feel the CRA formula did not go deep into consideration of aspects of poverty that are bedeviling Kenyans, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in the rural parts, like where I come from, in Kajiado East, Madam Speaker, Kajiado East has not been allocated a shilling in terms of the equalization fund, just because we've been viewed to be almost part of Nairobi, because we have Nairobians who are living around Kitengela, Madam Speaker, who have beautiful homes, who have moved out of the middle class in Nairobi, has moved into our area and built beautiful homes. But that does not mean the Maasais are not living in Manyatas. They're living in Manyatas with no water, no roads, no electricity, Madam Speaker. And so there is poverty in the midst of some plenty from some areas, Madam Speaker. And so, Madam Speaker, CRA should go deep into to address and get a formula that will address the real issues of poverty in this country, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, today, if I invite my colleagues to where I live, which is not very far, Madam Speaker, Konza City is a place, around Konza City, it's a place 1.5 hours and you'll be there. But I live in Nairobi because I cannot stay at home, like the people in Kiambu who go home, go Thika and come back. Madam Speaker, my place will be 40 minutes drive, but it is not. It takes 2 hours, and the road is bad. There'll be wear and tear. And should they come, Madam Speaker, I will not be able to reach my home because we don't have tarmac, yet we are so close by Nairobi. Somebody somewhere in this country, Madam Speaker, must explain why the inequalities in this country. Somebody somewhere, some government somewhere must be responsible, Madam Speaker. The Jomo Kenyatta government did not address the inequalities of this country. The Moi government did not address the inequalities of this country. Neither did the Uhuru government, Madam Speaker, address the inequalities of this country. I am hoping, I am praying that my president today will address the inequalities, that should we receive 38 kilometers of tarmac between Isinya and Konza, Madam Speaker, a lot of us will be operating from our homes and feel, the pleasure of operating from home and coming to work in Nairobi, the way the people in Thika do, Madam Speaker. We want to feel what these other privileged Kenyans do feel, Madam Speaker. We want to come from our homes, work and go back to our farms, Madam Speaker. It is possible, but we've been marginalized while being the bedroom of Nairobi. We've been marginalized while so near to development. We see the skyscrapers of Nairobi, Madam Speaker. We just get to see. We see the SGR crossing our area, Madam Speaker.
Your time is up, Senator.
Madam Speaker, we see even take a track of power lines.
Okay. Senator Osotsi.
Madam Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to say something on the equalization.